In this episode, I am going to be reviewing A Man Escaped, which was released in 1956. This was directed and written by Robert Bresson. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a podcast where I explore movies from all over the world and talk about how those stories are told on film. Today I'm talking about Robert Bresson's A Man Escaped, and I must first admit that I am not by any means any kind of an expert on Bresson. About 12 or 13 years ago, I first saw Pickpocket, mainly because Paul Schrader, who is a director and writer I really admire. Of course, he wrote Taxi Driver, and he directed a film that I also like called Blue Collar, and many, many other great films. He's a huge fan of Pickpocket and Bresson, and was highly influenced by Bresson. So I decided to check out Pickpocket, and my initial impression was that it was dull, and I sort of wrote it off, and it was a number of years again until I revisited Pickpocket. The second time I saw it, I loved it. I got interested to go back and look at more of his films because of the film scholar and professor Ray Carney, who has talked about how much he admires Bresson. So I think the reason I found it dull the first time around is because I especially when I was in my early 20s, I wasn't as used to these minimalistic films where you really have to go to them. They don't come to you. They don't wash over you. And there's a real attention that you have to give a film like Bresson because basically he really did not believe in borrowing anything or using anything from any other art form. And he believed that a lot of movies were just basically reproducing theater and, of course, using performances, using sets. He did not want to use anything unless it came from cinematic means, unless he could tell the story visually and cinematically. That means that he's going to use voiceover, he's going to use sound effects, the image, editing, music, and that's how he really felt he should tell stories. He even took performances out. He would refer to his actors as models. He just did not believe. He felt that if this was going to be an independent art form, then we should purely be using cinematic ways to tell the story in cinematic language. And it's an interesting point. I don't know that I totally agree with his view, but he certainly made his stories work that way, and there's nothing like them. And this film, of course, A Man Escaped, is about during the war, a French man who gets arrested by the Germans and he becomes a POW, and the whole film is him trying to escape by any means necessary, and also in a way where it was impossible for him to escape because he's in this prison where it's heavily guarded. There are Nazis everywhere, and there's really no way he could get out. And this is the dilemma. Now, of course, the title's called The Man Escaped, and though you obviously know that it ends that way, throughout the film, I'm thinking, how is this guy going to get out? This is going to be impossible. How does he do it? And that's what really hooks you. Now, the reason it works so well and it is actually so captivating is the threat of him getting caught, and he finds ways to slowly get out. And Bresson really puts you through every single plan he made through his use of voiceover, what he was thinking, what he was feeling, the fact that he wanted to talk to the other prisoners and have some kind of a connection, but they weren't allowed to talk. That also helped with the lack of performance because so much of it is the voiceover. And he eventually realizes that he could basically put a hole through the door by chipping in on the middle of each of the boards, and then at night when he was done, he would tape them and stick them back together with paper by blackening the paper so that people couldn't see that he had actually cut the board so that he can make a hole and walk right through it. And even as he says, every noise you hear, every footstep as he's chipping away with a spoon that he was able to steal. He managed to steal as his tool. And that's what's so emotional about it, because you're thinking, oh my God, what is that sound? Is that a footstep? Is someone coming in? And this is obviously what he's thinking, because he is taking such a chance. If he is caught doing that, he's going to be executed within a couple of days and beaten up. It actually begins with him trying to run out of the car where they originally arrest him in. And, he goes for the handle, then he hesitates. He goes for the handle again. He hesitates. Finally, the car stops and he just tries and he gets caught. He gets beaten up. And, it's interesting. One thing I noticed was that the blood-stained shirt, he wears that shirt the whole time. I mean, they weren't giving any kind of change of clothing. And you really feel for all of these men. And I can see how that could work with a lack of performance, because again, the actors are doing very little. When they are having conversations, they're trying to make it seem like they're not talking, because every now and then you hear the Germans yelling at them, don't talk, you're not allowed to talk. And they're talking through bars at certain points, and they're communicating. There's these other prisoners early on who are walking, who I guess they're allowed to walk in the yard for periods of time, and he's slipping them notes. And so it's done in a very, very subtle way, and it's so quiet. And just every single thing that he does, things go wrong, or he has to wait like weeks in order to make another move. Even just getting the door open in order for him to get through it took like a month for him to chip away all day at these boards so he can make a hole. All he knew was that he could then get into the hallway. He didn't know. So then he had to think, well, what am I going to do next? Then he begins to collaborate with a guy across the hall. Orsini was his name, I believe. And this man wants to escape, and then that guy gets caught. He tells him through the door what went wrong. Then he starts to make hooks from the fence in the bed that under the mattress was made out of fence. He makes hooks out of them. He makes ropes out of clothing that he has to steal and get enough clothing so that he can make all these ropes. I mean, it is a detailed plan, and he has to think about every single thing that could go wrong. And therefore, he's taking tremendous risk, because he knows as soon as he goes out there, there's going to be no turning back. He has to know exactly where he's going to go. He has to know exactly what he's going to do. And he did understand that there may be the odd surprise that he's not aware of. So he had to scope the field. He had to scope the fences of where he was going to run to, which walls he was going to have to climb. So this took a long time. And of course, the other people in the jail are saying there's no way you can get out. And an element of this film is faith, and hope. And he really believes that he can do this. And a lot of the reason why he took this chance was that he just had such faith and hope that he will get out and that he will survive. And there's actually a priest in there who basically says, well, you should pray and God will save you. And he says, well, it's too easy for me to rely on God. I have to do this. I have to have hope in myself. And it's quite something. And then, eventually he has this young boy who's 16 who comes in, and right away, is this guy here to spy on me? Is he with the Germans? Am I going to be able to trust him? If I start to go out the door, is he going to start to scream and then I'm going to get caught? Am I going to have to kill him, or am I going to have to take him with him? And, he pumps this young boy with all these questions, and he doesn't tell him anything about himself. And I believe he was doing that to see if he could trust him. And it's really, really interesting how much he was trying to see what he should do with this kid. And we don't know anything about, this kid tells his story, but we're also thinking, is he lying? Is he there to spy on him? Maybe the Germans know that he's trying to do something and they sent this kid in there so that he can confirm that he's got that he's making ropes and hooks in here as an escape plan. You don't know, and he does not necessarily know. Every time there's another moment when they're all having lunch and he puts a letter in one of the guy's pockets about his escape plan in case he gets caught. So at least someone else can take the idea, perhaps, and that they could escape. And you see the Nazis going to the uniforms and searching some of the pockets, and luckily they didn't search the pocket that he put it into. And this is, this goes back to, of course, what Hitchcock would talk about, where if you have an actor look at an image and then you cut to the image, and then you cut back to the actor, that the audience then puts together what's happening. So if you look at the actors' faces, their reactions are totally neutral. And as they're looking at the Nazis searching for the what may be in the pockets, we're thinking, oh my god, these guys are going to get caught, and I get scared. The audience is then, I remember just sitting upright thinking, oh no, this is death is upon him. But when you look at the actors' faces, they're not necessarily doing anything like looking scared or anything. It's done visually, it's done cinematically, and this is what Bresson really, really believed in. Another thing that he said was music in movies should not be used as ways to just sort of elevate what's already happening in the frame. It should transform the image. It should add total new meaning to the image. Same with sounds. Otherwise, it's just an image, which is it's really, really fascinating to me. And he didn't make too many films because they weren't huge commercial successes. They were very quiet. They were very minimalist. And they didn't necessarily, I suppose, have all the bells and whistles that a more commercial film would, that often makes money in box office. But it's really wonderful. This is another film I saw, I don't know, maybe sometime in the last 3 or 4 years, that I also thought was bland. It seems that every time I watch his film again, I have a totally different experience. I imagine that perhaps I didn't know what I was getting into on those first viewings, and wasn't really mentally prepared to really be paying attention. And I think that's what is really, really required here, because as I said, everything from the sound to the voiceover to the situations of this man trying to escape is so methodically, so procedurally, that you have to really be following it. And as a result, you really experience it and feel it. I mean, it is not some intellectual essay, or it really is an emotional experience. There's another, when he does eventually go with the boy towards the end, and they're on the one last wall that they have to climb. There's a Nazi riding a bike, doing laps in a bike below them, and they wait like well over an hour to see if this guy was going to leave, or when they could make a move so they could cross the rope over to the other side. And they just stand there and stare at this guy waiting. And we are waiting, and we're getting impatient because you want this guy to, of course, escape. And you root for him. You're totally on his side. But I thought it was done really beautifully. Wow. I'm really looking forward to seeing his other films. I mean, it's an interesting thing that he says about cinema has to stand alone. He felt that the only thing that it could maybe dance with painting, and he was actually a painter, and he didn't say that just because he was a painter, but obviously painting is about images, and obviously film images are a major part of it. So he felt that painting and film could dance with one another. Perhaps they're cousins with one another. He didn't really expand too much on music, because to me, obviously, well, if you're using music, aren't you also using that, even though it's transforming the image? Aren't you also using music as part of telling a story, just like acting does, or sets do in theater? I'd be curious to hear more about what he has to say about that. And if anyone knows, please comment below. I'm not sure more of what he felt about his opinion on music and film, other than, as he said, music has to transform the image as opposed to elevating the image, as it often is the case. Just over, really emphasizes what is going on in the scene. So I'm just really fascinated by this. I mean, it was a new way of pushing the medium forward. It was a new way of knowing. It was a new way of expressing a story, and I'm very, very fascinated by Bresson, and I look forward to seeing more of his films. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I also want to mention that I am also on Patreon. For those of you who don't know what Patreon is, It is an exclusive membership where I have bonus content that I put out every single month that people actually can vote on. It's all based on polls. So you very much will be a part of the decision making as to what I create every single month on Patreon, which is exclusively for you. This is a great way for content creators and other artists to earn an income while they keep creating free content, either on audio podcasts or in this case YouTube and things like that. So it's just a few bucks a month and it really goes a long way. Head over to patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. And lastly, if this is your first time on my channel, please consider subscribing by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head right in the corner here to your top left. In just a second, just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.